Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavascha Rupa Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vikam Skam Sadivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Punyavadi Astatya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva, Shiva Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Pariprajakacharya Stautra Satasri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Pariprajakacharya Stautra Satasri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, my dear devotees, those of you who are joining on Zoom, please turn on your cameras as far as possible so you can see your moon-like faces and it will be more personal. Thank you. So, today we shall be reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, Prahlada, the saintly son of Hiranyakashipu. Text 32. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Naisammatista Vadaru Kramangrim Srishatyanartha Pagamo Yadartha Mahiya Shampadarajo Bhishekam Niskinchananam Navranitayavat Naishammatista Vaduru Kramangrim Sprishatyanartha Pagamo Yadartha Mahiya Shampadarajo Bhishekam Niskinchananam Navranitayavat. Na, not, Asham, of these, Mati, the consciousness, Tavat, that long, Urukrama Angrim, the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is famous for performing uncommon activities. Sprishati, does touch. Anartha, of unwanted things. Apagama, the disappearance, yet, of which. Artha, the purpose. Mahiyasham, of the great souls, the Mahatmas or devotees. Pada Raja, the dust of the lotus feet. Abhishekam, consecration. Niskinchananam, of devotees who have nothing to do with this material world. Na, not. Vrinita, may accept. Yavat, as long as. Translation. Unless they smear upon their bodies the dust of the lotus feet of a Vaishnav, completely freed from material contaminations, persons very much inclined toward materialistic life cannot be attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, who is glorified for his uncommon activities. Only by becoming Krishna conscious and taking shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord in this way can one be freed from material contamination. So before I read the purport, I would like to discuss the background to this verse. Prahlad's father, Hiranyakashipu, was a great demon who considered Vishnu to be his enemy. Earlier, Vishnu, in the form of Varahadev, had killed Hiranyakashipu's brother, Hiranyaksha. And thus, Hiranyakashipu was even more inimical towards Vishnu. Prahlad was only 5 years old, and one day his father asked him what was the best thing that he learned in school. And Prahlad shocked his father by saying that the best thing that he had learned was devotional service to Vishnu. His exact words are, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmanivedanam. The 9 processes of devotional service. Hiranyakashipu became furious, and he called Prahlad's teachers and accused them that Prahlad, my son, whom I've entrusted to you for his education, is speaking favorably about my enemy, Vishnu. You are to blame. And the teacher said, no, you are wrongly accusing us. We are not to blame. You have taught him these things. No, we have not taught him these things. You have allowed Vaishnavas in disguise to enter the classroom. No, we have not allowed any Vaishnavas in disguise to enter the classroom. Then where has he learned all these things? They said, we don't know. You better ask him. So Hiranyakashipu asked his son, Prahlad, and Prahlad's answer begins a few verses prior to the one that we just read. Prahlad replied in text 30, Matirna Krishna Parato Svato Va Mito Vipadyeta Graha Vratanam Adanta Gobir Vishatam Tamishram Puna Punascharvita Charvananam. Prahlada Maharaj replied, because of their uncontrolled senses, persons too addicted to materialistic life make progress towards hellish conditions and repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclination towards Krishna are never aroused, either by the instructions of others, by their own efforts, or by a combination of both. So here, in reply to his father's question, how did you become Krishna conscious? Prahlad says that it is not possible by one's own efforts, by the efforts of others, or by a combination of one's own efforts and the efforts of others. So logically, it would seem that all possibilities have been eliminated. So it seems impossible. And then in the next verse, Prahlad basically says that Well, I'll read it. It's nice. Text 31. Nate vidu svarthagatim hi Vishnu durashaya ye bahirarthamanina andaya tandaya upaniyamanas te pishatantram gurudam nibadha. Persons who are strongly entrapped in the consciousness of enjoying material life and who have therefore accepted as their leader or guru a similar blind man attached to external sense objects, cannot understand that the goal of life is to return home back to Godhead and engage in the service of Vishnu. So Nate vidu, they do not know. Svarthagatim, the ultimate goal of life or their real self-interest. He, Vishnu, is Lord Vishnu and his abode. And unfortunately, most people, at least nowadays, are like that. They don't know what their real self is, and consequently, they don't know their real self-interest. They don't know that their self is the soul, part and parcel of Krishna, and that their real self-interest is to serve Krishna. As blind men, guided by another blind man, miss the right path and fall into a ditch. Materially attached men are led by another materially attached man, are bound by the ropes of fruitive labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. So Prahlada gives a very accurate description of the unfortunate souls who are not Krishna conscious. So now we come back to the question which Prahlada's father asked him, how he became Krishna conscious. And he answered in this verse, unless they smear upon their bodies the dust of the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, completely freed from materialistic contamination, persons very much inclined towards materialistic life cannot be attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, who is glorified for his uncommon activities. Only by becoming Krishna conscious and taking shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord in this way can one be freed from material contamination. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Purport. Becoming Krishna conscious brings about anartha apagama, the disappearance of all anarthas, the miserable conditions we have unnecessarily accepted. The material body is the basic principle of these unwanted, miserable conditions. The entire Vedic civilization is meant to relieve one from these unwanted, miseries. But persons bound by the laws of nature do not know the destination of life. As described in the previous verse, Isha Tantryam Urudamni Badha. They are conditioned by the three strong modes of material nature. So Badha means bound. Badha Jeev, the conditioned souls who in bondage. The education that keeps the conditioned soul bound, life after life, is called materialistic education. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has explained that materialistic education expands the influence of Maya. Such an education induces the conditioned soul to be increasingly attracted to materialistic life and to stray further and further away from liberation from unwanted miseries. As Srila Prabhupada has described the modern materialistic educational institutions as slaughterhouses. Just like an innocent cow is sent to a slaughterhouse and murdered, so the innocent souls who are subjected to the materialistic education their spiritual lives are being murdered, and their spiritual life is their real life. One may ask why highly educated persons do not take to Krishna consciousness. The reason is explained in this verse. Unless one takes shelter of a bona fide, fully Krishna conscious spiritual master, there is no chance of understanding Krishna. The educators, scholars, and big political leaders, worshipped by millions of people, cannot understand the goal of life and take to Krishna consciousness, for they have not accepted a bona fide spiritual master and the Vedas. Therefore, in the Mundaka Upanishad 3.2.3, it is said, Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyo Tamedayana Bahuna Shrutena. One cannot become self-realized simply by having an academic education, by presenting lectures in an erudite way, pravachanena labhya, or by being an intelligent scientist who discovers many wonderful things. One cannot understand Krishna unless one is graced by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Only one who has surrendered to a pure devotee of Krishna and taken the dust of his lotus feet can understand Krishna. First, one must understand how to get out of the clutches of Maya. The only means is to become Krishna conscious. Lord Krishna makes the same point in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Devi hiesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. Devi hiesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. That the material energy, Maya, consists of the three modes, and it is very difficult to overcome. Devi hiesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. Mam eva ye prapadyante payam etam tarantite. But one who has surrendered to Krishna can easily pass over Maya. But how can we surrender to Krishna? That is the question. And the answer is given that we can do so by surrendering unto Krishna's devotee, not by trying to surrender directly to Krishna. One cannot understand Krishna unless one is graced by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Only one who has surrendered to a pure devotee of Krishna and taken the dust of his lotus feet can understand Krishna. The verse says, Pada Rajobhishekam. Pada means foot, Raja means dust, and Abhishek. Abhishek means literally to bathe oneself in the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee. First, one must understand how to get out of the clutches of Maya. The only means is to become Krishna conscious. And to become Krishna conscious very easily, one must take shelter of a realized soul, a Mahat or Mahatma, whose only interest is to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 9:13, Mahatmanas tu mam partha daivim prakritim ashritaha bhajantinanya manaso gyatva bhuta demavyayam. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. So in the verse, Prahlada says, Mahiyashan pada rajobhishekam. So Mahiya refers to great souls or Mahatmas. And how do we recognize a Mahatma? What are the symptoms or qualities of a Mahatma? So that is mentioned in this verse that we just read. It's also mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita 7:19. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavam mam prapadyante. That after many births and deaths of acquiring knowledge, one surrenders unto me. Bhavanam janma ante jnanabhamam Vasudevam sarvam iti, knowing that Krishna is everything, the cause of all causes, the cause of everything. Samahatma sudurlabha. Such a great soul is very rare. Therefore, to end the unwanted miseries of life, and we all want to end the unwanted miseries of life, one must become a devotee. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana sarvar gunaistatra samasate sura. One who has unflinching devotional faith in Krishna consistently manifests all the good qualities of Krishna and the demigods. Srimad-Bhagavatam 5:18-12. Yasya deve parabhaktir yata deve tataguro tasyaite katita yartha prakashante mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. Svaitasvatara Upanishad 6:23. Once Srila Prabhupada asked his disciple, Guru Kripadas, what is the most important verse in the Vedic literature? And Guru Kripa Prabhu replied, Harinama, Harinama, Harinami Vikevalam, Kalona Steva Nasteva Nasteva Gatiranyata. One should chant the holy names, chant the holy names, chant the holy names of Lord Hari Krishna. There is no other way, no other way, no other way for success in this age. And Srila Prabhupada replied, no. And he quoted this verse, Yasya deve parabhaktir yata deve tataguro tasyaite katita yartha prakashante mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. So this verse gives another elucidation of the definition of a Mahatma, which is most important because in the verse, Prahlada says that one can become Krishna conscious only by surrendering unto the lotus feet of a Mahatma. Then Prabhupada quotes in the purport, Yam evaisha vrinute tena labhyas tasyaiva atma vrinute tanum swam. The Lord is obtained only by one who he himself chooses. To such a person, he manifests his own form. Mundaka Upanishad 3:2-3. You might recognize that this is a continuation of the verse that Srila Prabhupada quoted earlier. Nayam atma pravachanena labhyo namedaya na bahuna shutena. One cannot become self-realized by having an academic education, by presenting lectures in an erudite way, or by being an intelligent scientist who discovers many wonderful things. And then the conclusion of that verse is, the Lord is obtained only by one who he himself chooses. To such a person, he manifests his own form. And to whom does the Lord choose to manifest himself? To the one who has surrendered unto his devotee and who has implicit faith in him and in his spiritual master. These are Vedic injunctions. One must take shelter of a self-realized spiritual master, not a materially educated scholar or politician. One must take shelter of a niskinchana, a person engaged in devotional service and free from material contamination. That is the way to return home back to Godhead. Jai. So niskinchana is a very important word in this verse. Kinchana means something, and niskinchana means without something. And this may be difficult to appreciate unless one has an understanding of yukta vairagya. There are devotees in Vrindavan, for example, who have almost no possessions. We can't say absolutely none, but almost no possessions. But if we look at Srila Prabhupada, apparently he had so many possessions. But he did not consider himself to be the proprietor of the facilities that Krishna gave him to use in Krishna's service. And that is the principle enunciated by Srila Rupa Goswami as Yukta Vairagya. The first part of Sri Rupa's definition of Yukta Vairagya is Anasaktasya Vishayan, which means, Ashakti means attachment. So Anasaktasya means without attachment. Anasaktasya Vishayan. Vishayan means the objects of the senses. Without attachment to the objects of the senses. Sambandhe, Nirbandhe Krishna Sambandhe. And seeing the relationship of so-called material things with Krishna, that they can be used in Krishna's service. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Uchte. That is called appropriate renunciation. And opposed to Yukta Vairagya is Phalga Vairagya. There's a river in India, at least at the time of Rupa Goswami, called the Phalgu River. And the Phalgu River appears to be dry sand, but actually it's not dry sand. Under the surface, it is a river. It's water, but it appears otherwise. So Phalga Vairagya, which you could say is false renunciation, apparently renunciation, but not really. In Phoga Vairagya, one rejects things as material that can be used in Krishna's service. And so we want to avoid that. And commentators on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, such as Jiva Goswami and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, says that one who is involved in Phoga Vairagya, false renunciation, can commit offenses by rejecting things, and they give the example of Mahaprasad, by rejecting things related to Krishna, such as Mahaprasad, as being material, and thus they commit offenses. So it is a very fine line. Srila Prabhupada gave the example of someone. If someone is directly under light, there's no shadow. But if he goes to one side, there's shadow, and if he goes to the other side, there's shadow. So if we go to the side of material enjoyment, there's shadow, there's darkness, there's Maya. And if we go to the side of false renunciation, there's also shadow, there's also darkness, there's also Maya. So if we right in the center, which is anasaktasya vishayan, without attachment to the objects of the senses, upayunjitahara, understanding the proper use of things in Krishna's service, sambandha Krishna sambandhe, yukta vairagya uchte, that is called appropriate renunciation or detachment. Yukta vairagya, yes, a proper renunciation or detachment. So Srila Prabhupada has given us a wonderful process. He's given us the perfect philosophy, and he's also given us a wonderful process that is not difficult. As described by Lochan Das Thakur, Kevala Ananda Kanda. It is simply joyful. Chanting, dancing, feasting, and philosophy. That was Srila Prabhupada's phrase to describe the process of Krishna consciousness. Chanting, dancing, feasting, and philosophy. Once one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples was giving a talk in Srila Prabhupada's presence, and the disciple said, chanting, dancing, feasting, and philosophy, and a little work. And Srila Prabhupada interrupted him, said, no work. So then the disciple began his talk again, and he said, chanting, dancing, feasting, and philosophy, and a very little work. And Srila Prabhupada again interrupted and said, no work. Because there is no work, no karma, it's only seva. And that's different from work. So Srila Prabhupada has given us the perfect philosophy. He's given us a wonderful process. Once a reporter asked Srila Prabhupada that you've given your life for Krishna, speaking about Krishna, hearing about Krishna, offering service to Krishna, everything for Krishna. But what if in the end there is no Krishna? And Srila Prabhupada replied, even if there is no Krishna, I wouldn't do anything different because I like what I'm doing. I like talking about Krishna. I like hearing about Krishna. I like worshiping Krishna. I wouldn't do anything different even if there were no Krishna. So it's beautiful. It's absolute. Srimad-Bhagavatam says, Bhakti Sanjataya Bhaktya. That bhakti comes from bhakti, which can be understood in two ways. One way is that, prema bhakti comes from sadhana bhakti. Srila Prabhupada said in Krishna consciousness, the means and the end are the same. So bhakti comes from bhakti. Prema bhakti comes from sadhana bhakti. But also bhakti comes from bhakti can refer to the process that Prahlada was discussing, that we have been discussing, that the bhakti in the heart of that one gets bhakti from the bhakti in the heart of a devotee, of a bhakta. So in that way also bhakti comes from bhakti. So it's very beautiful and very blissful. And we should accept the process with full enthusiasm. As Srila Rupa Goswami says in Upadeshamrita, Utsaha nischayat daryat tat karma pravartana. Utsaha, the first necessity is enthusiasm. And as Srila Prabhupada says, you cannot be successful in anything, material or spiritual, without enthusiasm. So utsaha is first. Utsaha nischayat daryat. Daryat means patience. We need both enthusiasm and patience. Srila Prabhupada said that if you have enthusiasm but not patience, it can lead to a desire to control. And if you have patience and not enthusiasm, it can lead to lethargy. So we want both. Utsaha nischayat. Nischayat means confidence, and daryat, patience. So my dear devotees, from distant places all over the world, thank you for joining us for this wonderful opportunity to think about Krishna and speak about Krishna and hear about Krishna. And now, if you have any questions or comments, you can raise your hand.
Okay, go ahead, Hare Krishna. Shanti Kumara Swami. Shanti Kumara Swami, Mataji, Prabhuji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Guru Maharaj, is it possible to, I just thought of getting a clarification about sadhana bhakti leading towards prem bhakti and the other bhakti. Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj.
Yes, bhakti comes from bhakti. And Srila Rupa Goswami has explained that to progress in bhakti, you do not need to add anything else, such as karma or jnana or yoga. the only thing required to reach the successively higher stages of bhakti is the preceding stages of bhakti, nothing else. So, and as Srila Rupa Goswami explains, ado shraddha tata sadhu sangha tata bhajana kriya. So there are different stages of practice. Ado shraddha, first is faith and attraction. Tata sadhu sangha, then association with devotees. And tata bhajana kriya, engaging in devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada says that taking initiation from a spiritual master takes place in the stage of bhajana kriya. And then anartha nivritti, the unwanted things. We read about that anartha in today's verse. So anartha nivritti, the eradication of unwanted desires, unwanted behavior. Then nishta, that means steadiness. Then ruchi, taste. And then ashakti, attachment. So these 7 stages constitute sadhana bhakti. And then the next stage is bhava bhakti. And then the final stage is prema bhakti. So the only thing required to reach the next stage is the previous stage. Bhakti comes from bhakti. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Swami, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Amrutanam Prabhu, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisance, all courage to Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj, very happy to see you and hear from you again. My question, Maharaj, is related to the dust of the feet of the Vaishnavas. My Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Prahlada Swami, had mentioned dust of lotus feet means obedience to instructions. And we hear many, like in pravachans and reading, we hear many instructions from Vaishnavas. Now, if we have to follow all these instructions, it becomes kind of overwhelming, and picking and choosing seems kind of disrespectful. So, Maharaj, how do we understand this situation? How do you cope with it?
It's true that the general explanation of taking the dust from the lotus feet of the pure devotee really means to follow his instructions. And but regarding your specific question that you hear so many talks by so many different Vaishnavas, and if you have to follow all of their instructions, it becomes difficult. I'm not exactly sure why it would become difficult, because generally they would all say the same thing, more or less.
Maharaj, if I may give an example.
Sure.
Maharaj, yesterday it's everything is congruent. It's not contradictory. But for example, yesterday's class, Prabhu mentioned that minimum 16 rounds we should chant. Minimum 16 rounds. However, we should try and endeavor to do more, and take a vow to do whatever, 17, 32, whatever be that case. Now, that's an instruction which has come from a Vaishnava, and at the same time, and there are other instructions also. Okay, in temple service, you need to do so many hours of work, seva, whatever it is. Now, putting all this together, plus whatever is our, as grastis, whatever is our other responsibilities, that kind of becomes a little tight. So what the Vaishnav says is not anything new. but then managing it all. So, for example, 16 rounds and only on Ekadashi you do a little bit more. But now to do more on a daily basis. And so from that perspective was the little difficulty.
One of the principles in the Nectar of Devotion, which, as you know, is Srila Prabhupada's summary study of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. One of the principles is not to accept more than what one can easily do. So I don't know if that's just another instruction that's going to make your life more complicated, but the idea is that one should not accept more than one can easily do. In other words, one should not be overburdened by trying to do too much. And what is more important to do and what is less important, that could vary from person to person. But if you're sincere, Krishna will give you the intelligence. Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. There's a nice example in Srimad-Bhagavatam when, you know the story that when Mother Yashoda was feeding baby Krishna her breast milk, the milk that was on the fire began to boil over. And so she set baby Krishna aside to attend to the milk on the fire. And Srila Prabhupada explains that, everything in the household of Mother Yashoda was meant for Krishna's service, for Krishna's pleasure. But sometimes one may have to do more than one item of service in relation to the same cause. And then Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse, Tesham satatayuktanam, and he says that the intelligence, what to do first and what to do later, is given by Krishna. So we are dependent on Krishna at every stage. And if we have too much to do, we can pray to Krishna to give us the intelligence what to do first and what to do later.
So the principle, Maharaj, is to try and do everything.
As far as possible.
Maharaj, my personal situation is I take these instructions and park it in my memory. And if some opportunity comes up, then I try to remember it. And if I can remember it, then I follow it. But in this case, from what I'm hearing from you, Maharaj, is to be actively conscious of these many instructions we receive and then pray to Krishna for the intelligence what to do when.
Yes. But, the most important, we could say, is the 16 rounds. You're an initiated devotee, so definitely 16 rounds minimum is most essential. Srila Prabhupada writes in one purport, very interesting and relevant purport, because there's a basic principle to always remember Krishna and never forget him. Smartavya satatam Vishnu, vismartavya nadatu chit. and should always remember Krishna, 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 and never forget him. And all of the positive injunctions in the scriptures are servants of the one positive injunction to always remember Krishna. And all the negative prohibitions in the scripture are all servants of the one negative prohibition to never forget Krishna. So that should be the basic guiding principle. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you. Hare
Bye.
Krishna.
One more question, Maharaj.
Yes.
Taruni Radha Mataji, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my most humble obeisances. Thank you so much for giving your association again to us in CNJ. Maharaj, my question today is related to one of the lines that you were talking from Srila Prabhupada's purport, saying that how modern education is considered like a slaughterhouse. So in our current situation, like in our generation, how can we process it, or to what extent, if we consider that, like, modern education is like sending our kids to a slaughterhouse, if that's the way we need to really take it, so that, and giving more importance to the spiritual life of our children, are we considered like fanatic? So that's what I'm thinking, Maharaj. If you could probably throw more light upon that.
Okay. Is that your son that you're holding?
Yes, Maharaj. I have another daughter, 8 years. He's 2 years, Maharaj.
Okay.
Namaste. Namaste. Yeah, that's my daughter.
Well, ideally, if there's a Krishna Conscious school, then you can send your children there. But if not, then you should try to balance the education they receive in school with our spiritual education. And, you can do that at home. And then many places have, many temples have Sunday schools for the children. And so they can go to the Sunday school. And it's also important that they have friends who are devotees, children, because, they naturally want friends. And so if they have devotee friends, that will be very favorable for them. So, we may not be able to avoid sending our children to regular school, but we need to balance the materialistic influence of the regular school with spiritual values and spiritual relationships.
Yeah. So my other point was like, if we are like not sending them to school, like say we are homeschooling them, because as devotees, what kind of impression are we also giving to the outsiders? Like these Hare Krishnas are so, like, they're just trying to avoid this kind of material education because they have a different, their goal is different in life. And the way they judge the society of devotees will be based on how our children will later turn out to be. So from that perspective also, I'm concerned, Maharaj. Like, to what extent do we need to provide or equip them so that they can also exist in society with other non-devotees too. So
Homeschooling is good. I know many parents who have homeschooled their children, and the children have come out very good, and they do well on their exams. And there are even associations where children who are homeschooled can meet with other children who are being homeschooled. So they're not socially isolated from, students of their own age. So that's good because they should be able to mix with other children and not be so isolated. And yes, it's a good service if they do well in their studies, because that's a good recommendation for Krishna consciousness. It's also a type of service to do well in their studies, to bring credit to the movement and to their devotee families. So these are good questions. But if there's more, I'm not sure I've answered exactly everything you asked. So if there's more, you can inquire further.
I kind of got what you're saying. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Because I'm currently homeschooling my daughter, and I always think about the future, like a couple of years ahead, from now, how will she be able, like how will she, adjust, or how will she, go to college? Those kind of questions kind of bother me at times. So with that, that along with today's purport, so I just thought like we just clarify with you, Guru Maharaj.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I mean, there's one girl, I mean, she's a young lady now in our, you could say, community of devotees here. And she was homeschooled and she's doing very well in college, extremely well. So, that could be another idea that you could maybe speak. I mean, she's one example. I'm sure there are many other, but you could like speak to the girl, speak to the girl's parents, their experience of homeschooling her, and how she's turned out to be, such a good person, a good devotee, and a good student in college.
Thank you, Maharaj. Begging your blessings so that we'll be able to, do it nicely.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
great for you and your children.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Next, Sharanagati Mataji.
Hi, Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
In relation to not becoming attached, sometimes if we're quite empathetic, when we're helping other people, if we feel that devotees are suffering, or if just different devotees that we try and assist in guiding their spiritual lives, if we really feel that they're suffering, even if they're not speaking about it, we can feel. Sometimes we can become attached to them not suffering anymore. And it's not so much that you're attached to their suffering. You can understand their that it's their journey, their karma, their, whenever they start to overcome obstacles that they need to learn from. So it's not that you want to be the controller, but still one can feel sad if you feel that they're suffering. So it's a fine line, because when we're feeling really Krishna conscious and blissed out, then these things we know we put love there and we can pray for devotees and help them. But sometimes at other times we find ourselves our mood changing, You know, if they're feeling inspired in their spiritual lives, like, whew, we feel a lot more peaceful. And then if something happens where, even if they haven't spoken that they're suffering, but we're speculating that they might be going through a time of suffering, our mood can be despondent, or we can feel a bit negative. And, you know, so it's like being affected by others in this way of attachment. And yeah, because I fall into this trap sometimes. I mean, obviously, for me, my main connection being a mother is when if it's one of your children or something, you know. So therefore, we under, you know, you do. I'm realizing in my own life, you get to a point where you do become more detached in a healthy way, but that bond, it's like you're I get affected, and I don't want to be affected so much in an unhealthy way.
Okay.
So how do we I know, like Bhakti Maharaj says about, you know, if someone is suffering, you feel they're suffering, but just having that distance from their suffering so that you can still remain that in how you're helping them is purer without without the parental attachment, say, or friendship attachment even. You know, you might have friends that you're helping and that have become like daughters and sons, and so that it's, you know, you catch yourself being too much of a control it in a compassionate way. It seems like a fine line, but it catches me at times.
Our general process for becoming materially attached is to become spiritually attached to Krishna. And then to the extent that we're spiritually attached to Krishna, we'll be materially detached. And in our efforts to help others, you know, we can naturally hope for a good outcome. But then again, we're not the supreme controllers. Krishna's the supreme controller. And so ultimately we have to depend on him. You know, as Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Yudhyacha masmaranam, fight and think of me. And we have to depend on Krishna for the result.
Yeah, and I can see it in that way, and also I suppose by focusing on our strengthening our surrender to Krishna, then even if we externally might feel we don't know what to do, just by it makes our association, and Krishna will give us the intelligence in how to help them through journeys that they may be going through or something. So yeah. By our because to focus on Krishna doesn't mean that you're neglecting souls that you're helping around you. It just means you become hopefully more empowered to assist them and know how to assist them.
Yes. Yeah, to become an instrument.
Yes.
Vita matram, become an instrument. Yes.
So, thank you very much.
Okay. Wish you all.
Maharaj, yeah, there is one more question, looks like from the same Mataji, Shanti Mataji. Before that, I totally forgot. Maharaj, I had requested if we can speak on the Sri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman installation, any Prabhupada instructions, or any pastime from the way the deities were installed from the Ramnami aspect. I requested if we can share. So what Prabhupada's instruction was in terms of the deities installation. So if,
I will do that. So shall we let Shanti ask her question?
yes, Maharaj.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Guru Maharaj, is it possible to enlighten us on Cheto Darpana Marjanam, where chanting cleanses the heart, the dust, cleanses the heart of devotees. Cleanses our heart, which is full of dust, and that dust were actually accumulated since time immemorial. Okay, what does that dust or impurities, what do they refer to? Do they refer to false ego, material desires? Prabhu, please enlighten us on this. Thank you.
Yes, that's a good question, and you have the basic idea of the answer. She said, "What are the dirty things? Cheto Darpana Marjanam. What are the dirty things?" And he said, the first dirty thing is identifying with the body, thinking of the body. That's the first dirty thing, and that can be cleansed by chanting. And then when that's gone, that false identification with the body, then everything else follows very easily and smoothly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Guru Maharaj. Thanks a lot.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So coming back to the question of the deities in Juhu, Srila Prabhupada did discuss with me the deities we should have. And, so we settled on, Gaur Nitai and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and our Srila Prabhupada for the left altar, which is like in Vrindavan. Then for the central altar, we already had Radharasa Bihari. And I suggested that we also add Lalita and Vishaka. And Srila Prabhupada got very excited and he said, excellent idea. I didn't think it was that brilliant because we already had that altar in Vrindavan, but I said it and Prabhupada was very happy with the idea. And then we came to the right altar where we have Sitaram, Lakshman, and Hanuman. And there was some discussion, and Srila Prabhupada himself said that there are a lot of devotees of Ram in Bombay. So it would be good for them, for all the devotees of Ram in Bombay, if we have Sitaram. And then again, the question, should it be just Sitaram, and then we settled on the full, Sitaram, Lakshman, and Hanuman. So yeah, it's a beautiful temple. It's wonderful deities.
Thank you so much, Maharaj,
Okay.
sharing that pastime. Malati Mataji or Malati. Go ahead, Malati Mataji.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to your divine grace. Guru Maharaj, how do you develop determination and enthusiasm in yourself?
Yes.
Especially, sorry, Guru Maharaj. Especially determination, actually. I wanted to know more about determination.
Well, first is enthusiasm, utsaha, and Srila Prabhupada said that you develop enthusiasm by following all the rules and regulations. Then the enthusiasm will come. Determination, I would say, comes from hearing. By hearing, because determination in a way is a function of intelligence, and by hearing, your intelligence becomes strengthened. Srila Prabhupada also said that that you strengthen your intelligence by using it, like exercise. Like if you do exercises with your body, your muscles become stronger. So if you exercise your intelligence becomes stronger. So yeah, both by exercise and by hearing, your intelligence will become stronger. And then that will give you the determination. Determination means that even if it's difficult, you still do it because you're determined. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada writes that there are certain activities that are called determined, such as fasting on Janmashtami and Ekadasi. So, yeah, we should be determined to finish up our Krishna consciousness in this lifetime and go back to Godhead.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Next, Sakshi Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaj. Please accept my most humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Guru Maharaj, my question is about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructs us to be tolerant and humble in bhakti. But often when doing that, we become a doormat for people to step on and treat us unfairly. And then it becomes a dilemma in ourselves because we're not as humble yet. So it becomes a dilemma in ourselves. How much can we tolerate? How to deal with that situation, Guru Maharaj?
That's a good question. I wrote a little essay called How Much Can You Tolerate? And in the essay, I mentioned Prahlada Maharaja, that sometimes you have to tolerate because you have no choice. Prahlada Maharaja had to tolerate so much, and he really had no choice because he was just a 5-year-old boy and his father was so powerful and cruel. And, you know, our philosophy is to be the servant of the servant. Gopi Bhartu Bharatam Layar Dasa Dasa Anudas. So, yeah, Srila Prabhupada advised us to address one another as Prabhu. Prabhu means master. So if the other is Prabhu, that means we're the servant. Das, das, anudas. So, you know, you say that, you know, you could do that, but people might take advantage and use you as a doormat. Could you give an example of When taking advantage of.
Sometimes it's about tolerating with family. Sometimes it's about devotees, and most of the times it's with non-devotees because they do not understand that we're just simply trying to be nice to them. We're simply trying to tolerate. But at sometimes it just becomes a lot to handle, and then when we react, eventually it's a big reaction, and then everyone's shocked. It's like how could you react like that?
I see. Well, it sounds like you might need to set some limits and draw some boundaries because, yeah, especially dealing with materialistic people, they may take advantage. And so, yeah, you do need to be careful. Yeah, we are in the material world and there's danger at every step. So, yeah, you may need to be careful and not just blindly, humbly serve everyone. And, you know, the Nectar of Instruction also gives advice because there's the sixfold loving exchanges, Dudati Priti Grinati Goyamakiti Prichiti, Bhungte Che Chaiva Bojan, Bhungte Bojai Bojai Te Chaiva Sadvi Priti Lakshana. And so in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that we have to apply these sixfold exchanges intelligently. And to apply them intelligently, we have to distinguish between different grades of devotees. So I think the same principle would apply to being a humble servant, you know, that you have to apply the principle intelligently, considering the status of the other person. But one other point about people.
Oh, sorry, Guru, please continue.
Yeah, one other point about people taking advantage. Srila Prabhupada said, if someone takes advantage of us, but we don't lose, we don't mind. The example was that at the first Delhi Pandal at Connaught Circus, which was attended by 20,000 people every night, there were some politicians who were, you know, they came forward to serve, but some devotees informed Srila Prabhupada that they have their material motives, that they want to be seen, to be associated with us, and to become popular and, you know, get votes from the people who are attending the Pandal program. And Srila Prabhupada said that if people take advantage of us and we don't lose, then we don't mind. So, all right, people may take advantage of you, but if you don't lose, then what's the harm? But if you do lose, then you have to be careful.
But Guru Maharaj, about being selectively humble and tolerant at different degrees, that would mean that our behavior is different with every individual. Is that okay?
I mean, internally, we should always be humble and tolerant. But in dealing with people practically, there may be things that we shouldn't tolerate, such as blasphemy. We're not supposed to tolerate blasphemy of devotees, for example. So, but yes, internally we should always be humble and tolerant.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
I think those are that is the last question. I think Maharaj, 9:59 p.m. So
All right, so we can end. Then let us conclude by offering Vaishnava Pranam. Let us offer our respectful obeisances to all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who are just like desire trees, who can fulfill the desires of everyone and are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls.
Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Vaishnava
Jai.
की जय।